Welcome to the fastest daf in town. Today, Metzia daf samach tes. We're going to begin about 8 lines from the top. Omar Rav. So we were learning in our Mishnah in yesterday's daf that a person is not allowed to supply tarnagoyim in order to be able to have half of the profit because of the issue of it being partially like a loan, and therefore it has the issue of ribis. And for that matter, it's for small animals, a golem, a syachim, you can't do this. And we said unless you paid wages to this person, as well as you paid for the food for the animal. And as we discussed this a little bit already in the Gemara, we continue now with Omar Rav. So Moiser Shlish B'scharcha Harizeh Moiser. So he says that, and let's go straight into Rashi. Hasham Egel Mechsa. Let's say, again, you gave over an animal to someone, and he'll be able to have half the profits. B'schar L'vehefsid, and therefore you say if there's a gain, I share the gain. If there's a loss, we share the loss. So he says a third of the investment, and anything above those profits will be kept by you, the worker, as wages. So therefore you stipulated that he will be able to profit from the wages above a point. So that's allowed to be done. So he says, we do not allow this because he would literally be potentially going into his house empty-handed. Now, in other words, it's necessary that you actually have to provide actual schar and not this stipulation, which there's a possibility of a gain or not. Therefore, you actually have to, in addition to say that, you have to have an additional set payment for this person for you to be able to do this, for it not to anymore look like a loan. The Saba Rav holds, apparently, that this is not something that is done, that we don't set aside extra monies for this to work. Rav, what do you mean? Rav says as follows, that Reish Egla L'Petuma, that literally the head of a calf is for it to be fattened. What does that mean? Says Rashi, Makabel Egel L'Fatmoy L'Maxis Haroish Yitul Kulo L'Chelko B'Schar Amola M'Zayna V'Shar Chelka M'Shav. It says that if a person is given this animal to fatten it up, so then he's able to be compensated for his work, and you have to pay for his work, and also for the food. Now, my love, says the Gemara, and therefore we see that even if you said this, it's not enough. Apparently, you also have to provide this extra set payment. So actually, it's not talking about the statement that was said, but rather you said if there is, you'll either receive a third of the investment, or reish egel patuma, that you'll get the head of the calf, again, for it to be fattened up. So basically, since you stipulated it differently, therefore it's not going to be a kasha on him. However, according to Rav, if moiser shlish b'scharcha harizeh moiser, that's considered to be enough, and therefore you don't have to add additional amounts. Iboy Sema, alternatively, Kikar Rav Moiser Shush B'Scharcha Moiser, when did he say that this will be suffice? That you don't have to give this guy who's watching your animal more money? It's going to Isle Behemuladi Day. It's where the guy already has his own animals that he has to care for anyway. So the Amri Inshi, because as the famous expression goes, was then Gabla Tairi. Basically, if you're doing some type of tircha to grind up or to mix up the bran and the grains and the barley in front of one ox, so you could do it in front of two animals. Like you're already doing the process of making this food for your animal you have to do anyway. So therefore, if you're doing it for a second animal, it's not really such a tircha. So therefore, since he has his own animal, it isn't much work, and therefore it's not necessary to have to give him more. Well, this Rashi above, going to Islay Behemois, well, Makabel, the Makabel, the one who's taking care of these animals, has other animals. He has to take care of his own animals anyway. And have one extra animal just hanging around that he has to take care of, that's not really a significant amount of extra work. And therefore, because of that, it's not considered to be necessary to give more. Says TA25. Be'ez oifen hitter Rav moiser shlish. When does Rav say moiser shlish b'scharcha harze moiser? So, as we just said, in the situation where Sheyesh Makabel Behemel Adidei, he has his own animal, right? Since he has his own animal, the Gvil Torah, Gvil Toiri, right? Since he has his own animal, so therefore it's not an extra tircha, and therefore this will work in this circumstance. However, maybe he'll agree where he does not have an animal and other animals, and he's putting additional tircha, then they have to be koitzatzu dinner. You would have to alleviate the issue of ribis, you'd have to designate additional set payments. Rabbi Lezer mehagroinia zavin behema. So he was in the process, in the transaction of the purchasing of and the selling of an animal. And he gave it over to his sharecropper. Sharecropper in general gets half of the gains and the losses. Then the purpose of him giving it over to this sharecropper was mafatimle, in order for him to fatten up the animal. Again, he'll benefit from its gains. Yoivle reisha ba'agra, and he gave him literally the head as a reward. V'yoiv palga ravcha, and he also gave him half of the profits. So Amalei debesu. So he said to his household, this is what the sharecropper said, Imish tatfos bahadei yoivloch nami al yasa. If you can actually get some type of appeasement from this guy, have him give you also the tail. So he was hoping not just for the head, he was hoping a little bit more. So that's what was said. Says Rashi, Ilu nasata chatzi hamois. If you give me half the money, vayisa shotav b'meheman, I'm a partner. Haynois lecha av ha'alya kul chelcha. Then you should also get the tail. So azul zavin b'hadei. So he went and sold it. Poligle ma'al yasa. And they divided. When it came to divide, Rabbi Lezer also divided up the tail. So he said, okay. So now the sharecropper said, now let's divide up the head, as you said before. Says Rashi, now I'm not going to give you the whole head, like you gave it in the beginning. So before that, it was my money. And therefore, when you accepted it, you accepted potential of half of the losses. However, if I don't give you a little bit more, it's going to end up looking like ribis. Says Rashi, so it ends up becoming half of it as a loan, and therefore it looks like ribis. So now that we are partners, Maka'amrit, what can we say? Tarachna tvei porta, that you did a little bit more tircha. Fine. So Amri inshi stamarisa lamari ara kimishabed nashe. The truth is that when it comes to a sharecropper, in his relationship to the master, it's usually connected to the land. that he's connected. Lasuye rayo. Says Rashi, Miro behemos, to make a shepherd for the animals, Sheno sarach liknois b'shuk, doesn't have to buy them in the marketplace, Shishlo tuach b'shviloi. So it would be an extra tircha for him to have to go into the marketplace, and therefore this was alleviated. Tanurbanim. Hasham behemel chavero ad matzi chayv l'tapel. So if a person is involved in this arrangement, how long are they committed to this arrangement they can't back out? So Sumchas Aimer Basanois, if we're dealing with these types of donkeys, Shmoinas Achaydish, 18 months. However, Begoid Rois, Rashi says Behemadaka, small animals, Chavdal Chaydish. Then it's a longer period of time that this deal of you taking care of the animals is 24 months. If let's say you wish to divide it up within that time frame, Chaverim Akivulov, then the other partner can say no. It's beyond. We haven't reached this requisite time limit, and therefore the owner of the animal could say no. We're not dividing it yet. We cannot compare when it comes to taking care of an animal in the first year as opposed to the second year. Says Rashi, the second year is more because you need to feed them more food, because they're getting bigger. As the animals get bigger, so it's certainly a more difficult process. There's greater tircha. Okay. Hasham behemel chaveroi. Again, a person who is involved in this transaction, this business deal, if you will, between partners, how long do you have to take care of the vlad? Says Rashi, if they have a child, if they have a baby, so then they also are able to split it up in half. They're able to divide it and get that profit as well. The question is, when is the minimum time that you can do that, or how long do you have to wait to take care of it before that's done? So Bedaka Lamed Yoim, we're talking about small animals, 30 days. Begasa Nun Yoim, then you have 50 days. Why 50 days? So Rashi says, Kederach Shapir Locha Hakasa Betipol HaBachor, Shechayv Yisrael Tapol Boy Bedaka Shloishim Begasa Chamishim. When it comes to the number of Bachor, that's what we do. It's 30 for a small, 50 for a big animal. And after that amount of time, then you give your firstborn animal to the kohen. You don't just give the animal who's a bachor immediately to the kohen. When it comes to a small animal, 30 days, 50 days for a large animal, so therefore it's the same thing in this situation, that they're held on for that amount of time. Rabbi Yosi Aimer Badaka Gimel Chadashim, 3 months. Why? Mimnesha Tipul Maruba. My Tipul Maruba, what does that mean? They have very small, weak teeth, and therefore they need special care, and therefore it's better that you should wait longer. However, after this time span, then it's split up. Which seems to be what we were told he's supposed to do. Who divided it up for you? Says Rashi, Misham Oisa Shema lo Nishmeis Yafe. Who did this splitting up? Maybe it wasn't done properly. You shouldn't have done it this way. But it's a place where they grow. That if it's in a place where we raise the vlados, then you're supposed to keep them until they get bigger. Says Rashi, Havlados Achihu Gedolim, the Enu Noitel B'Shel Chaver Klum. So therefore, again, according to him, this is a second problem. If this was the minig, then it becomes a problem. He wasn't supposed to do that. Hanhu Trey Kutoi, David Iska Bahadi Adadi. So you have these two kutim that are doing business among each other. Azochan Minayu Pol Gzuzi Beloy Daite, the Chabre. So one of them divided up their monies that they put in without the consent of the other person. They just did it without letting the other partner know. My nafkamina. What's the difference? Hachiyam Rav Nachman, Zuzi, when it comes to money, command the pligidam. It's like it's already divided. So therefore, either partner can withdraw his share of profits for cash. Lashana Zovan Chamra, like later on next year or whatever, they purchased a donkey, Bahadi Adadi together. Kami Idaf Polag label Adaite, the Chavre. So the guy who thought he could do this when it came to money, he should be able to also do this without the consent of selling his portion of the donkey. Also committed Man Polag. Again, who says that it was divided properly? I see that it was going after it says D-Day. Fine. Asi. Mar Didi Ka'asimar. Armura Papa, as we continue Samach Testament Bays, Ki Gavna, in this situation, Vadit Sarch Aduye Zuze. You definitely need to inform him. Zuzi, when it comes to money, Mi Shakel Tave Mishavik Chasre. So therefore, when it comes to money, it doesn't really change. You're just taking your money, and therefore that's why you can do it without his consent. Chamer, when it comes to this situation of, did I translate as a donkey? Maybe it's actually wine. Let's see, 1 second. Zovan Chamra, it's wine. Okay, so he when it comes to them splitting up the wine, there's some that is good and some is not good. So therefore, there's the huge distinctions between the two, and therefore, just because he was able to take or split up his money, that's different than the wine. Okay, let's see. Question 1. Hasam behema l'chaveroi. Hasham behema l'chaveroi. Chayva tapo b'vladais. Bedaka lamidyam gasal nunyam. Maha makar l'shim halol Rashi. So as we said, just like we saw in the Psukim, by a Bechor, Gam Yisrael Shechai Matapel B'Bechor Kodim Shenit L'Koyin. Before you give it to the Koyin, you have to be Matapel for a certain amount of time. Okay. So I wrote B'ma Be'ez Oifen this is TB 26. Be'ez Oifen or Omer B'Gemar Sheshut of Yochel Achlik B'Loi Das Chavero. So I wrote B'davar Sheish Heker Sheish Chisaron V'lo B'Kesef Shein Heker Yodas. I don't think that's correct. I think it's Pumfakert, and it's what we just said over here, TB 26, that when it comes to money, it's not a problem, right? My nafkami nahachi amar Rav Nachman zuzi kamanda palgidami. So when it comes to money, it's allowed to be split up. That's not an issue. However, when it comes to wine, especially because it could be when it could potentially be different quality wine, so therefore the din will be different. Okay, let's continue. Kufa Omer Rav Nachman zuzi kamanda pligidam. We say that partners are allowed to split up their money. Hanimili tavi v'tavi utikuli. We're talking about that the coins are exactly the same. Tavi tikuli low, but if the coins are different, right? If their coins are of different quality, so then you're not allowed to do so, because it's almost again like the wine. Rav Chama havi moiger zuzi b'pshita. B'yoyma kol zuzi the Rav Chama husavar ma'ishna memara. So he thought that he was able to do this because it should be no different than a spade. Says Rashi, when it comes to a spade, it's not an issue. Velohi mara hadar be'ein aviyade pechase. When it comes to a spade, when you return the object, you know that it's going to devalue in a normal use, right? So therefore, because of that, you're returning basically the same thing. When you lend money, they're not returning the same coins, you're returning different coins. And a person doesn't know if it goes down. So therefore, you're not allowed to charge an extra fee when it comes to coins because it'll look like ribbis. However, when it comes to a spade, so you could do that because it's the same thing. Fine. So again, the question was whether he was allowed to lend. When he was lending money, he ended up potentially charging extra money, and that would be an issue because it's considered to be ribis. Okay, but again, it's not like a spade. Hadra be'ena. Oiso kli, the same spade, says Rashi, chayzer ba'atzmo, be'ein, it's returned the exact same way. Ve'eno halva etzloi, badamim, it's not like lending money, ve'ein achrayus olav, im nenes o nishbar machmas malacha. It was normal wear and tear, you don't have to pay for it. Hilkach ein sechar ribis. And therefore, charging him for using it is not considered to be ribis. However, when it comes to the coins, and it says v'yadia pechase v'oid shenikar pigamoy shunifgam. You can look at the spade and you can see if there's any nicks or something. And you know it got ruined because of the normal wear and tear of work. So therefore, for that reason, you're allowed to charge this fee. However, Zuzi, says Rashi, lo hadri beinahu shahari moitziim. You spend it and you give back different money. Lefikach achroyaso olav uschar ribis, and therefore charging him it would be ribis. Even though you call it like a rental, doesn't matter. It's still considered to be like a loan. Even if he does give it back, you're not going to know if it's somehow lost value. And therefore, because of that, it's an issue of ribis. Okay, so that is the distinction. Question. Well, let's get to the mission now. A person is allowed to say to his friend, "Helach dalad zuzi, take this 4 zuz, the oisve leplanya zuze, and you should give it a loan to someone else, to a third party. So you're not the person who's actually involved in. You're not the lova. So even though you're the one who's like charging interest, but you're not the lova, because lo asur el ribas haba malayva leloiva. It has to be from the loiva lemalva. And over here, the ribas is being charged by a third party. Yomi Rabbi shari leil initial memer leil chav. You can say shakalach arba zuzi. Take this money. Yomi leil ploni leozfan zuzi, and the third party will end up lending the money. So my time a schar mira kashakal. He's actually being paid a fee only for his efforts. He's being paid for his efforts, like a finder's fee, almost like a commission. And therefore, this is allowed because he's not the one who's actually charging interest. He's asking, you should pay me because I was able to find someone to lend you money. Kihadi Abba Marba Rapapa Habishakal Ugna Dekira Mikiroi. Says Rashi that he took chalois, these hanitachais b'kelim ketanim agulim kaganois. They were cut into like small vessels, and which were like made out of wax. Yermali was fin huzuzi, so he said to lend me money. Amalei rabban rapapa achal b'rei damar rabisa. He's eating ribis. Armahu kol ki hay rabisa nechel. Lost or tire el ribis abam malova lamalva. It's not an issue because the ribis is only if it comes from a lova, a borrower to the lender. Hachaschar mirka shakel v'shari. Again, all he's doing is it was like a finder's fee. It was a fee for his efforts, for his words. So he's not charging interest by the loan, but he's getting paid for having made this suggestion. Question 2. Mehema tamim da schirus mois havi ribis. When it comes to renting money, it's ribis. But when it comes to renting an item, it's not considered to be ribis. So a kli, like for example a spade, is chayz be'enoi. It's returned as it is, the exact same item. Ve'enu achriyasolav, so you don't not chayv achrayas if it gets broken machmas malacha. But money is not returned the same way, and therefore you're a chayv achrayas on it, and therefore you're responsible. And also kli pigamo nicker. a kli, its pagam is recognizable. Miskalkel machas halacha, it got ruined because of the normal wear and tear. Of a motion yadia pchas didhu, you don't know it's lost. Nimsus charachinam, therefore the ribis that you're charging is you're charging ribis. Says the next Mishnah. Masnisin. Shaman par v'chamor v'chol davar shehu oisav oichel l'mechsa. So a person is allowed to give over his cow and his donkey, anything in which actually will produce and do some work, and he'll be able to keep half the profits. Now we said you should not be able to do that because half of it is considered like a loan, but over here, as the animals are working, so this is considered like the person's compensation because the animal's working for him. If you're in a place where they divide up the animal immediately, says Rashi, Kishitavu Shnas Chalukasan, as we said, the 30 days or the 50 days, whatever it means, it doesn't mean literally immediately when it's born, but it means right away when you're able to, so you divide. However, if the custom is that you have to keep raising until it's bigger, so then you have to do it. That it's not necessary to give extra payment for the labor or the food, because these young animals are going to be nursing from their mother, and they're basically being supported by their mother animal, and therefore you don't have to give any extra money for the labor. Umafriz al sadehu, you could charge additional. You can charge additional rent in a chayshim shum ribis. Okay. Says the Gemara, Tanuban, Mafriz al Sidehu v'inu chayshish mishum ribis. Ketza, what exactly is this case of the safe of our Mishnah? So, Seichas asad b'chavero be'esrim kurim, chitin l'shan. A person rents out a field from his friend, which is the measure 20 kur, produces 20 kur of wheat for a year. The Armaloi said, Tainli Mosayim Zuz, he says, give me 200 zuz. The Farna Sena, and I'll provide sustenance, says Rashi, Kol Tsarka, for all of its needs. And I'll give you 12 kur. So as he improved the field, it's not considered to be ribis, even though originally the stipulation was a sar kur of wheat. And now he's saying 12 kurin of wheat. Lishana for a year. So mutter, he's allowed to do this. Why? He says Rashi, Ein zu ribis. Schar mois, it's not considered to be ribis of the money, el she chaycher mimenu sada meshubachas. He's now renting out a nicer field. Umalo b'charichos sada toiva yos mesadira masayim zuz shnei kurim chitin. And since it's a higher quality field, therefore he pays more. Mafriz lo al chanus v'al. However, you cannot do this if, let's say, you rented out a store or a boat. You cannot lend him money to purchase fruits and then to sell them in the store, because again, that looks like ribis. Sometimes you can do this with a store with surah surah. If, let's say, he's going to paint the store, which we'll see enhance it. Svina lasasla iskaria, or for a boat if it's for a new mast. Chanus l'tzur batsur to the tzavubayinshi of a havi agritve. So therefore, if more people, it's nice ambiance, a nice atmosphere, so more people are going to come. Svina lasasla iskaria, when it comes to putting this new mast on the boat, kivan de shapira iskaria tve. Agra tve. So he's going to end up making more money because the boat's able to move better, and it's going to be of better quality. Svinta, when it comes to this boat, Omarav Agra Upagra. So the renter will have to pay for the damages for its normal use. Amalei Rav Kahana Rav Asi or Rav, I agra lo pagra, I pagra lo agra. It doesn't make sense. Mamanav shach, says Rashi. How is it? So says Rashi before, mutul askir almanas. You can rent it on condition shim tishaver. If it breaks, yishalom oiso hasoicher. He has to pay it. So he says kivan denoito sachar. If he's getting paid, ein lo l'tavo dmei shivarasa. He shouldn't have to pay for it if it broke. And v'i pagra lo agra. Be'achar sheshama b'damim shim tishaver. If you evaluate that if it breaks, he has to pay. So havila milva. He's like, it's like a loan. The havi schara ribis, and therefore it's considered to be ribis. So how is this acceptable? So Shasik Rav, he didn't have the answer. Omer Rav Sheshes my time is Shasik Rav. Lo shmili hadasani. You just didn't hear that we learned that from me. She'amr in mekablan soin barzum Yisrael, that when it comes to someone who's engaged in business with his friend and he accepts responsibility that if he dies, it'll die by him, and if he gets lost, it'll be lost by him. So he'll accept the gains and the losses. And that they're going to split up. They're going to split up all these losses and gains. So that's considered to be tzayin barzel. Why is it called tzayin barzel? It says Rashi shekashik barzel. It's hard like metal. Shekaim eitzel balav in poichas etzel. So it's not going to change. In other words, whatever happens, happens. So when it comes to tzayin barzel, back in the Gemara, avol mekablin tzayin barzel and a nocher. You couldn't make this stipulation from Nachar. But the Chachamim said, Hasham par mechavera b'emel hari paraslan asuya lai b'shleishim dinner Daniel chatzelo b'chaydish mutter. So he's allowed to make the stipulation. If he shul asa damim v'lo asa. Amar sheisha shul asa damim mechayim el achar misa. What happened was that it was only if the animal dies. So therefore it's considered to be a rental and not considered to be ribis. So Papa Hilchas Asfina Agro Pagra. The din is when it comes to a boat, Yutaka are able to make the stipulation and say you can rent it unconditioned. If it breaks, you'll have to pay me. You have to pay for it. Daf Ayin v'nahagu b'nei Kufra Agra b'shas Meshicha. So it says the Bali Sfina, who are called the b'nei Kufra. These people would take wages, take the money at the time of it being pulled. It says Rashi, nois and nois miyad. V'yavol pishikibo schara nois lo pagra likishitaver. He would take the money in case it broke. Pagra b'shas shvira. So agra b'shas mashicha. Rather, he would take the money for the wages of the rental right away. Pagra is b'shas shvira. However, he would only require the monies to be paid for the damages when it got broken. Atu b'minhaga tali milsa mishum demasnisa tali minhaga. So he said this is not based on a minhag, but rather it's totally on the masnisa. Says Rashi, Chachi shavkinan lahu lekabel sachar, however soiflik noisakula. Okay, Adkan.